episode 15 of the Andy Beshear podcast. Remember, you can download us on all major platforms, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at Andy Beshear Podcast. Today's podcast is going to be a good one. We have Liz Shuler, the president of the AFL-CIO, an organization that supports working Americans, union members that has over 12.5 million members. We're going to talk to her about her journey to the presidency, about breaking that glass ceiling, being the first female president. And she's going to give you her evaluation that this big, ugly bill is one of the most devastating pieces of legislation that's going to kill jobs that she's ever seen. We're then going to have our conversation with the Johns, except today it's going to be John McConnell and my son Will, and we're going to have a little spin on Gen Z lingo that hopefully you enjoy. But before we start, I think what makes this podcast special is that we're different. This isn't a back and forth. It's not about scoring political points. This is about a conversation between friends. It's about processing the news of the day, and it is about real talk with people trying to make this world a better place and figuring out how we do it. The way we have these authentic conversations is by following our cast rules. Number one, be authentic. We want people to be their real selves when they come on this show. We want people to learn something about them that they've never heard. Second, we got to talk like real human beings. How you hear us interact on this podcast ought to sound like you talk to your friends. Third, we want people to tell their why. Not just the what they believe, but the why they believe it. What drives them? What motivates them? When we share our why, we create grace and space to maybe hear each other just a little bit different. Number four, no debating reality. Far too often on podcasts or on the news, people deny facts or truth or math. It's time that we stop doing that and make sure that we are treating facts as facts. And finally, have fun. We've had a lot of fun in our first 14 episodes. We're going to have some more today. So with that, here is episode 15. You're listening to the Andy Beshear podcast. Our guest on episode 15 is Liz Shuler, the president of the AFL-CIO. She heads up this group, which has 63 unions and over 15 million people that are represented. I shorted it in the intro. They have 2.5 million more than what I started with. Liz, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Governor. This is such an honor to be with you.
Well, I'm really excited because a lot of our listeners, I believe, are very supportive of organized labor, but might not know the role of the AFL-CIO.
Yeah, so we are an umbrella organization. We, as you said, 63 different unions. We represent working people. We are bringing voice to those who are in a union, but also lifting up the needs of working people across the country, no matter if you're in a union or not. And so we're very proud that we can bring voices to all the spaces, whether it's Capitol Hill in legislation or into the public eye of what teachers are going through, what manufacturing workers and construction workers are enduring in this economy, sports figures, professional athletes and actors. So our membership really runs the gamut from any type of job you can possibly think of.
As I was looking through your members, who I know pretty well, at least here in Kentucky, you have everything from the United Auto Workers, who are working at Ford and GM plants in Kentucky. You have the steel workers that are out there working on major projects. And as you mentioned, you have Major League Baseball players through their players associations, professional basketball players. What's it like to represent such a broad coalition of workers?
Well, it definitely makes coming to work every day an absolute joy and privilege, because if you think about what makes our country hum. It's the work of the people who deliver the services that we all rely on, who make sure that we have food to eat on the table, whether it's growing the food or delivering it at a grocery store. And, construction projects that we're all in the summer, right? Enduring a lot of road construction. Well,
Yes.
those are good jobs, good union jobs to make sure that we get to our destination safely. So every type of job you can think of that makes our country move, we bring the voices of those workers to try to build more power so that they actually can make a decent living and have a secure life and be able to predict their schedules and to have health care and retirement security. So I think it's really the face of America, frankly, is what's behind America's unions.
When people think about the history of unions, I think they think back to ending that 60-hour work week. They think about bringing safety into the workplace. They think about ending child labor practices. Tell us what some of the more recent issues that you're addressing are.
Well, that is true, Governor. There is a lot of old stereotypes, I want to say. People think, oh, unions, they were relevant way back when we didn't have labor laws, or as you said, when we had children in the workplace. Well, fast forward to today, we're still dealing with a lot of the same
Mm,
struggles. We actually do have children still working in meat packing
that's right.
plants across this country, or certainly in agriculture, right? Where we know that the labor laws are not inclusive of those who work in ag or domestic workers. So it's often a misnomer that the labor movement isn't relevant anymore, when in fact it couldn't be more relevant now than ever. And when we talk about technology, for example, and how technology is affecting work, a lot of people are talking about artificial intelligence.
Yes.
We are on the forefront of making sure that those changes in technology and how they impact your jobs, make sure that we include workers' voices in how those changes happen, that we're negotiating at the table with our employers to make sure that we get the training that we need to get to that next job in the future. And we're advocating on places like Capitol Hill, where, in this last
Mm.
bill with the reconciliation bill, they tried to put a prohibition on any protections on AI for 10 years at the state and local level. And we fought. We said, no, this cannot happen, because you can imagine how much change is going to take place over the next 10 years, and we need protections for working people.
This is the Andy Beshear podcast. We're talking to Liz Shuler, head of the AFL-CIO. You mentioned a buzzword or phrase to me. I've been talking about this big, ugly bill as much as I can to whoever I can. I've described it as the most devastating piece of legislation to rural America. I think you've called it the largest job-killing bill in history. Give us an evaluation of it.
Absolutely, and you stole my words, Governor, because you said it correctly. This is the worst job-killing bill in American history, and every member of Congress that voted for this devastating bill picked the pockets of working people
Amen.
to hand billionaires a $5 trillion gift that they didn't need, by the way, in terms of these tax cuts. So the harm that the bill will cause working people cannot be overstated. It's going to rip healthcare from 17 million people. Hospitals and nursing homes will close. Millions are going to lose their jobs. And everyone is going to be forced to pay higher daily costs, all while they're driving more resources, of course, to this cruel mass deportation effort. And just to give you a flavor of some of the jobs that we're tracking, because we are a labor organization, certainly in the healthcare arena, because of the impacts on hospitals, especially in rural areas, as you've mentioned. Energy. We
Mm-hmm.
had billions in clean energy investments that were putting construction workers to work, and also helping us with our clean energy economy over this, the entire country. And so we project that about 1.75 million jobs will be lost in the construction arena, from these canceled investments. And it's about 3 billion work hours for construction workers. So, it's going to ripple out across all of the various industries throughout our economy, but it's also going to impact services. And so what our job is to really unpack, what's in this bill for working people, because most people are working, 2 and 3 jobs and 12 to 15-hour days, and they're not tracking exactly what's in this bill. So we want to bring the facts. We want to show people what the connection is between both the services that will be lost and the jobs, because it's both.
I think in addition to that, we're going to see lower worker productivity. The idea that if you live in a rural area and work in a rural area, you've got to take off a whole day now to see a doctor because you're going to drive 2 hours to and from. And then when your kids need to see a doctor, it's another day. And when your parents need to see a doctor, it's a third day. So I imagine as you look at benefits packages that you all try to negotiate, there's going to be further challenges in the future when you can't see your doctor or secure your health care in your own community.
Yes, and I think a lot of people also don't realize, there's a lot of talk about folks on Medicaid, but for those who have negotiated in their contracts, for example, or those who actually have health insurance through their employers, the costs are going to go up for them too.
Yes.
Because we know that that's going to have a cascading effect on our hospitals and how they can provide service. We did a study on at AFL-CIO.org. You can find the study that we believe it's now going to cost the average person who has health insurance almost $500 a year more per person because of these cuts.
I also worry about what services get cut in rural hospitals. When you look at delivery, that's one of the areas with some of the lowest margins. And what does it mean for Americans, especially women getting close to their due date? If they are 2 hours away, are we going to have someone staying in a hotel while their partner or their husband are hours away working? What that can do to the American worker or the American family is just so challenging.
And what you're bringing to the surface here, Governor, is the reality of the impacts on real people. Because I think most everyone has been thinking, oh, this is some distant thing that's happening in Washington, D.C. It's about politics. No, it's about the impacts on real people. And I think you're doing exactly what we want to do is humanize this, right? And actually bring to the front what real people will be experiencing.
The idea that this isn't owning the libs or getting the other side, it's impacting your direct daily life and making things harder. Making paying the bills harder, making getting those services harder. I also have concerns in rural America about what happens when we lose all those jobs and there are less dollars that are going around in that community. Does that mean that the restaurant closes down, the coffee shop? Does that mean that there's not an expansion at that next business? In other words, the lost construction jobs create even more lost construction jobs moving forward.
Absolutely. The ripple effects will be enormous. And sadly, people aren't feeling it quite yet. It's going to take some time for it to start cascading out. But you're absolutely right. There will be direct impacts where people will lose their jobs, and certainly direct impacts then on some of the services that we just discussed. But people aren't really talking about how that impacts the community writ large. And I think everyone knows someone, they call, what is it, 6 degrees of separation, I guess, that everyone...
Or of Kevin Bacon.
Exactly. Well, everyone will know someone who will be impacted, and we're already seeing that. And, we did some hearings across various parts of the country, particularly in rural areas, when DOJ started making cuts to services and jobs. And then we've seen that has just been put on steroids in terms of this big bad bill that just passed. And what we heard from people all across this country was exactly what you pointed out, that the doctor who's in a rural area who is already working around the clock, barely making ends meet him or herself, but to see the patients that come through now, and then knowing that the volume is going to increase and they won't be able to keep up with demand because of the lack of care. This notion of the things like the postal service, right, that we know are under attack. Also, the idea that rural areas won't, sometimes we know that's the center of gravity, right, in a small community is the post office, that it's a lifeline for so many people. But we're going to be seeing cuts. We're going to be seeing, a move to try to privatize the postal service, which, as we know, will drive up costs and make it more and more difficult for folks in rural communities to get that service.
Conceptually, it's so hard to accept that many members of Congress would vote for such a devastating bill, because I believe that they know it. But this is the clearest example I've ever seen of people saying, I'm no longer going to represent my constituents, that I'm going to put my party or my allegiance to one individual ahead of my country or my people.
Yeah, and how many times did we hear folks who actually voted for the bill say, I don't like what's in this bill, but I'm going to vote for it anyway? There's something very wrong or broken with our system, where you end up in a situation where you're putting the sort of the special interests ahead of your constituents, because we know that this is all about giving more tax breaks to the wealthy, to corporations, and as I said, who don't need them. And a lot of those folks getting those tax cuts are the ones who were the big donors to the campaigns of those elected officials. So we have a lot to unpack here. My hope is that the constituents in those districts will be rising up, will be mobilizing and activating in their local areas, so that those members of Congress actually see the impact and feel the brunt of the damage that they caused with this vote. Because this is all about, again, real people and people who are struggling, people who are trying to put food on the table for their families and try to have a decent job and a decent way of life. And it's just becoming more and more difficult to do that. The American dream has been at risk for some time, as we know, this inequality gap that has just continued to widen. The top 1% are doing great and continue to do well. And then we just see that gulf between those people and the rest of us. And so I think that's what we in the labor movement hope to bring, is power in numbers. The fact that we can balance the scales when we come together and negotiate for more, because we know we deserve more. People are working harder and harder for less, and it's not fair.
This is the Andy Beshear podcast. Our guest this week is Liz Shuler. Liz, I've got this theory about the Democratic Party. And I know a lot of people are asking these questions. I've seen you on cable news talking about it just like I have. And that's that the party has very good policies for working Americans, but at some point stop talking as directly to working Americans and stop showing our priorities by how much we talk about what. That if we talk about 100 different things, a hardworking American might say, well, only 2 of those apply to me. How much time are you spending on how much I make, or where my next doctor's appointment is, or public safety in my community, or the school my kids go to? What are your thoughts?
I couldn't agree more. And after the last election, we heard it over and over again that the Democratic Party in particular really missed the boat in how it communicated with working people. And it was working people that really decided this election. And there was just an absolute chasm in how we reached people, and what we said when we reached them. And to your point, we just weren't talking about people's experiences in an authentic way. And I know I was out on the campaign trail. I was talking to working people for months and months on end. And mostly people told you it was about the crisis in affordability,
Yes.
the fact that costs have been going up and people, couldn't keep up with the costs of groceries and gas and housing. Oh my gosh,
Hmm.
housing. And that, most of the candidates weren't focused on those issues. So it was this notion of connection. And meanwhile, Donald Trump does a pretty good job of messaging, and it's a lot of rhetoric that doesn't match up with the reality, but the rhetoric does resonate. And so we as the labor movement have been saying all along, we have to be talking about working people's issues. Um, and really a credible messenger is that person in your community that, is a has a following because they work at the grocery store, or maybe the community or union leader that is doing the volunteer work or responding to disasters. A little something about that, right? It's like you're making those connections in your day-to-day life to talk about issues year round instead of political candidates. And so we've really been doubling down on this issues based approach to conversation, because we know it's not going to be Democrats or Republicans that save working people. It's going to be working people who save working people. And so we keep saying it shouldn't be about partisan politics. We're fighting for freedom, fairness, and security for all working people, and that cuts across party lines.
I couldn't agree more. It's that idea that a good job isn't red or blue,
Yeah.
left or right, and it lifts everyone up. And if first of all, politics is supposed to be a route to public service, and then public service, you're supposed to do the best you can for everybody. But a brand of politics that maybe isn't partisan, and lately I've been thinking we use bipartisan too much, but more of nonpartisan.
Yeah.
That roads and healthcare and jobs and education, those are things that in most people's everyday life aren't partisan. So why are we pushing this destructive force on them instead of saying we're going to do the best we can here before we ever argue about anything else?
Yeah, and you touched on something there, and it's about finding the commonality versus the division. Because there's a lot of work being done right now to divide us. And we know that that's what makes us weak. And that's what breeds the kind of march to authoritarianism, as people have been talking about, that our democracy is really at risk here, because we have kind of taken our eye off it, that we've pushed away from politics. People have become so dispirited, and it's so toxic out there that people just turn off. They don't want to have anything to do with it. So this idea of bringing folks back together in a nonpartisan way, where we're just focused on, the struggles that we all endure and what we have in common. And so that's what we've been trying to do too in the labor movement is let's focus on what we agree on. Don't we agree that we all should make a decent wage
We
and
should.
be fairly rewarded for our work, and that we should all have health care, and we should all be able to predict our own schedules, and have affordable quality childcare, and all the things we care about on the day to day that seem to get missed. And so I'm encouraged that I'm seeing a lot out there as I travel now. People are more mobilized and energized and activated than they've been in a long time. And a lot of it is because they're like, wait a second, I see what's happening. I can't just stand by silently and watch things devolve. I need to get engaged and active and help make a difference.
So I recognize that it ain't easy to become the president of the AFL-CIO, and I want to make sure we give credit where credit's due. You've made history, being the first woman to ever serve in this role, which I'm guessing meant getting there was even harder than previous people's path. What's your why? What drove you to want to serve in this position and to stand up for working Americans?
Well, I'll go back to where I came from, which is in Portland, Oregon. I grew up in a union household. My dad was a power lineman at the local power company. My mom worked at the company as well, was an admin, and I worked there. And so it was a family operation. until it wasn't, when Enron came in, a company that many people will recognize that name, bought our sleepy little utility company and drove it into the ground, into bankruptcy, playing fast and loose with the rules and trying to deregulate electricity and make money. So I watched my dad, who had worked for this company for nearly 40 years, hard work as a power lineman, was getting ready to retire, lost his pension because of that bankruptcy. And that ignited something into me, because I said, you know what? That is not fair, right? That people who work hard, do show up to work every day, aspire to retire at some point after decades of hard work, should be able to do that. And it's that promise that was made, right? So that really inspired me to say, well, what is it that actually can combat, a fast talking company like that can just come in and wreak havoc on a community? Well, it's the unions. Labor is really the one institution left in this country that is for everyday Americans who can come together to leverage their strength and power and balance the scales. And so that's what really inspired me. That's why I do what I do. I'm actually a little bit emotional for some reason right now.
That's
but
what
it's,
happens when we talk about our why.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just so excited because you mentioned being a woman in this role.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that the labor movement is now half women.
That's
And
incredible.
a lot of people don't see us that way. So we're the largest organization of working women in the country. So that makes it even more exciting to be in this seat in this moment, because as we know, the workforce is changing. We're building for the future, and I'm just honored to be, along for the ride here.
I was thinking about how your job, like mine, it can be stressful because you have a lot of ups and a lot of downs.
Yeah.
I was thinking that you went from, say, last year with record contracts for the UAW and the Teamsters, which are helping people here in Kentucky, to now dealing with the Trump administration, which certainly isn't pro-union. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with the ups and the downs?
Lots of walks in the woods with my dog and my husband. It's like a whiplash kind of situation, because you're right. Thanks to folks like yourself, Governor, and the Biden administration, who really saw the value in investing in working people, investing in our country. I think about all of the opportunities that working people had on the horizon that basically have just been devastated, especially by this bill that was just passed, and a lot of the executive orders that this administration put into effect right away. The elimination of collective bargaining rights for nearly 1 million federal workers was the largest single act of union busting in the labor movement's history.
Wow.
A lot of people think about the air traffic controllers, PATCO back in the 80s. It dwarfs that. And but we've been, I think, playing a good game of defense, but always with an eye on offense, as they say, on the front foot now, because we see this moment of organizing opportunity. The country supports unions. In fact, 71% of the people believe in unions, and it's 90% of young people under the age of 30 are pro-union. So people want to belong to unions. They know the benefits of coming together collectively. Unions will be more relevant in the future than ever before, as technology and the changing workplace continues to evolve. And I think it's an opportunity to really be looking forward into the future.
This is the Andy Beshear podcast. We're finishing up our conversation with Liz Shuler. Liz, we like to close by trying to have a little bit of fun, especially in this crazy world, with questions that are designed for people to get to know you a little bit better. So what is your favorite meal?
Well, I love ethnic food. So I would say a perfect meal would probably be at my local Indian restaurant in my neighborhood, Masala Art.
What is your secret superpower that no one knows? we've had people that can cook a certain thing. For my wife, it's packing a suitcase. What's that secret superpower?
I am a secret weekend warrior and I do a lot of DIY, so I'm not afraid to stick my hand in a toilet.
All right. That is a good secret superpower. If you could go back in time and tell yourself not to follow one fashion trend, what would it have been? I had some haircuts I wish I could erase.
Wow, that's a tough one because there's so many to choose from. Maybe leg warmers.
Oh, leg warmers were great. I'm a big fan of the '80s, but I could see that. What's something about you that people are surprised when they learn?
Wow. I feel like I'm an open book. That's a hard one.
Well, that's a good thing to be.
Yeah, that I came up through the electrical workers union, I think does surprise people. I came up on the electric utility side, but a lot of people think of, these male dominated industries and they're like, what? A woman? You? So that's, I think, one thing that comes to mind first. Um, yeah, and then maybe just doing a lot of handyman stuff, or I should
Hmm.
say handy person stuff.
So if you had to do a job different than what you're doing right now, looking back, what do you think you choose?
Well, I love the arts and I love just being creative and using, paint and mosaic tile. And so if I didn't have to worry about making a living, I would definitely have pursued something in the arts.
And perhaps the most important two questions I've asked, because you mentioned your dog. What type of dog and what's his or her name?
Uh, my black Labrador is the love of my life. He is a 13-year-old former seeing eye dog, and his name is Trader, like Trader Joe, not like Benedict Arnold, but Trader.
This is the Andy Beshear podcast. Our guest has been Liz Shuler. Liz, thank you for the great conversation.
Thank you so much, Governor. And we are so, so grateful to you for your leadership and for the voice you bring for working people every day.
Happy to do it. You're listening to the Andy Beshear podcast. This next segment is called In My Kentucky Accent. It's when I talk about what's on my heart and mind, what's been burning me up that week. And today, I'm pretty fired up because Congress passed that big, ugly bill proposed by the president, and it's the most devastating piece of legislation for rural America and working America that I have ever seen. This big, ugly bill is going to devastate health care across this country. In my state alone, 200,000 people are projected to lose their health care coverage. They won't be able to go see a doctor when they're sick. The bill is going to fire 20 to 30,000 healthcare workers in Kentucky. Those are doctors, nurses, orderlies. Those are people who contribute to their community who are going to be out of a job and thus aren't getting any tax break. And it threatens to close 35 rural hospitals. Folks, this isn't just devastating to healthcare, it's devastating to the economy of rural and parts of urban America as well. These rural hospitals, the ones that might close, are typically the second largest employer in their communities, and they typically have the largest payroll. So just think about what happens if any of them lay off a third or more of their staff. Those are hundreds fewer people going to the local restaurants, the local coffee shops, going to the local bank. It's going to mean there are significantly fewer dollars going around in those local economies, and that's going to hurt absolutely everyone. And then you look at all the other things that this big, ugly bill does. I mean, look at what it does to food assistance, shifting huge costs to states, and ultimately making cuts where people are going to go hungry. Listen, in my faith, the miracle of the fishes and the loaves is in every book of the gospel. And I think what it says is that in a country where we grow enough food for everyone and then enough to export all over the world, no one should go hungry. That is a basic test of humanity, and this Congress failed it. Folks, we don't elect people to go to D.C. to represent their political party. We elect them to represent you. And these congressmen and senators that voted for the big, ugly bill have failed you and have failed this country. We all deserve better, and I'm going to keep fighting for it. Next on the Andy Beshear podcast, it's our version of a round table, except instead of a table, we have a tiny couch and two guys named John. It's our conversation with the Johns. Today, John Rabinowitz is not with us, so Will Beshear will be filling in, and as always, we have John McConnell. Y'all ready?
We're ready.
So ready.
Yes. I would like to point it out. We'll miss John, but at this point, there'll be no shameless small business self-promotions as well. So that's going to free up a little more time to have a conversation.
Let's start with a topic we've talked about a lot, but it keeps changing. The chaos continues, and our economy keeps getting hit because of it, and that's Donald Trump's tariffs. The on again, off again, across the board, industry-specific, company-specific, reciprocal. It seems to constantly change. And then I think last week we talked about how the newest approach was the letter. And the letter said that if you didn't agree to something by August, you were going to get April tariffs. Except since then, we've now had a threatened tariff against Brazil because he doesn't like a criminal proceeding going on there, as well as 30% tariffs against Canada and really high tariffs against Japan.
Mm-hmm. Another one that was put out there was another 30% tariff against Mexico, possibly. And here's one thing I would like some input on is that he's actually quoted as saying, this is going to make our country a lot of money.
I think there's a level of concern that these tariffs are really being proposed to bring in enough dollars for the tax cut. But that would be paying for an income tax cut for wealthier Americans, almost basically a sales tax on all the goods out there, because what happens with tariffs? Prices go up and we, the consumers, pay for it.
And I kind of feel like saying the country's going to make a lot of money, but then at the same time, like you said, it's going to cost us as consumers a lot of money. And at some point, that's got to settle out to where we can just go back to doing business with our biggest trading partners. What's your feelings on the best way for us to start back down that path?
Well, it's a challenge. I mean, it's a challenge because we're taking decades, if not more, of good relations, understanding that trade is only part of that relationship. There's also security, international security. There's foreign direct investment where we make a lot of cars for Japanese manufacturers. The largest Toyota plant in the world is in Kentucky. And so it's recognizing that it's more complex than that. But one of my biggest concerns is how this president directly insults other countries, and does that lead to an American backlash or a backlash against America on our products?
Yeah, I would have to agree. Like, I don't know how more specific we can get with these tariffs. He's changed his policy 4 times or more, if my count is correct on this, and I just don't know like what the goal of this is from my perspective. Like, obviously, making the country a lot of money is what he's saying, but the fact that we haven't seen any results yet.
What was it, 99 deals
Yes.
or 100 deals in just a few days? I guess my final thought on this is it's slowing down our economy. I'm seeing it. Companies can't move forward with projects in the United States right now because they're going to import a lot to build the project or equipment. Even if they wanted to reshore, the overall cost could float by such a degree that it could put the company under. So I know I've said it before, but pretty ironic that his goal is to reshore. His tool is tariffs, and the tool he's using is preventing his goal.
And moving on to another topic, Russia, all over the news again. You know, in the very beginning during the campaign, this was a really big deal that if I'm elected within 24 hours, you know, Ukraine and Russia will stop their war. Well, we're somewhat past 24 hours, and here we stand.
Will, you didn't grow up with Rocky IV, but I'm pretty sure that even you recognize that Russia is the bad guy here.
one instance, he's a great person, and another instance, he's the enemy.
Describing Putin.
Putin, yes. And it just doesn't make any sense to me as a young person, and I don't think it should make sense to anybody.
And this is a country, Russia, that invaded another country. It's very clear who the aggressor is. And another example of Congress just totally changing its position, with the exception, I'll give Mitch McConnell the fact that he has stayed with his support of Ukraine, but going from this broad bipartisan support for a ally country that's important. Ukraine produces a huge amount of wheat that the United States relied on, to suddenly altering that position dramatically just shows that Congress isn't doing its job as a separate branch of government.
And then another part of this is as far as the leadership, seeing the people you're in the room with. He came in to be Putin's friend, to come in to make this work for all of us and try to get a war ended. Then all of a sudden, he's now saying that, he talks good when we're together, but then he bombs people. And like it's a revelation.
At least he's recognizing it.
Yes.
And if he moves forward with sanctions against Russia, it's the right move. It probably took far too long. I worry that, like tariffs, it could change overnight. But hopefully that's moving in the right direction. Let's close up talking about these floods in Texas that have just wrenched at the heart of every American. To lose that many people, to lose that many kids is tough. There's a lot of questions raised about the response. I think that the Trump administration is reacting like it is a political attack, and I agree there shouldn't be politically based attacks when we're talking about this, but I think you always have to answer the questions. How do you do better the next time if you don't answer the questions about what happened?
Well, in this one, I think the count now is 132 people have passed away. And when I saw the pictures of Camp Mystic, that affected me because my daughter went to a camp similar to that, to where she had her little trunk she would take in, and that's what they would be in their cabins, all down near a creek. And it just makes me look at the response and what could have happened and how that response was timed.
And I want the answers to those questions, but I want what's front and center to be those families and what they're going through, and most of our energy to go to support them. But I hope that everyone asking and answering the questions recognizes that the most important thing is, no matter how this response went, that we're honest about it, and we always figure out how to do better. We've had, Will, how many floods have
I've lost count.
that we've had in Kentucky, and every single time we've looked back at it and said, what more can we do? What more can we do? What more can we do? And you see me when I come home, and how hard it is. I want to make sure that we don't lose as many people the next time or the time after that.
Right.
As we close out this week's edition of the Andy Beshear podcast, we're bringing back one of our favorite segments, Gen Z lingo, but we're doing it a little different. Today, Will is going to ask John and I about some Gen X lingo, and we're going to see if we can explain it to his generation.
I'm really nervous. I want to put that out there.
I can understand.
My heart is pounding.
It should be. The tables have turned at this point.
Yes, I'm not really comfortable right here, but I want to ask about kicking it old school.
What a great
That's a good
Gen
one.
X phrase. And it takes you back, doesn't it?
It takes us back a little bit. Yeah.
So kicking it old school is about doing something the way that you used to do, like back in the day.
Okay.
So think about a band that's been around for 10 years, and think about their first album and how different it is. Well, if they were going to play that and play it in the way that they used to, you'd be kicking it old school.
Okay, so if we talked about the word skippity, would we be kicking it old school since that was the first episode?
So if we went back and we did everything the way we did on the first episode, we'd say we're going to kick it old school and run this podcast.
So is it the exact same?
Well, let me give you an explanation that I think Gen Z can understand.
Okay.
And I'm going to try to explain it in a way to where the boomers can understand it too. Are you ready?
I'm so ready.
So Mr. Beast is one of the most popular podcasters in the world. He gets hundreds of millions of views on his current YouTube episodes. He's also now on streaming services. But you've shown me his first episodes from years back. Now his current budget is like $1 million for each of the ones he produces. But he started out walking around his town, giving out money for people who needed it or who would stand in a circle long enough, and basically filming it on an iPhone.
Yeah.
And so if Mr. Beast looked at his buddies and said, you know what, we're going to do this like we did the first episode and walk out and do it, he would be kicking it old school.
That was an amazing explanation.
great
Hats
explanation.
off.
I do communicate for a living.
This is true. You're okay at it.
So if we use the word "will," that was awesome. Is that our lingo, or has it transitioned to your as well?
Awesome?
Yeah.
Awesome's just like a regular vocabulary word.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's lingo necessarily.
All right.
So,
What about rad?
rad is definitely a Gen X lingo. When I looked that up to ask about a lingo today, that's the first thing that
You,
popped
you
up.
almost asked us about
I
rad.
almost asked you about rad.
What about cool beans?
I used that earlier when I was
did.
texting
You
you.
actually
Okay.
texted that to me.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
But when we think about what about gnarly?
I can kind of imagine what that is. Just like something being. Well, actually, is it like a cool, gross?
Yes.
It
thing?
is.
It is.
Okay.
Now I'm not sure that I could explain the difference between rad and gnarly, other than the fact that you decided to say one of them instead of the others, or your friend said awesome, and then the next guy said gnarly, and you were stuck with rad.
Real world problems right here.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember we had movies like Pump Up the Volume, so yeah, we had to find different words to appear like rebels.
Or the bicycle movie that was actually called Rad.
That's right.
Yes, there was one.
That's right. So today, we did a lot. We talked to Liz Shuler, and she talked about representing 15 million working people. You heard in my Kentucky accent how upset I am about what this big, ugly bill is going to do, especially the people of Kentucky, but to the people of rural America. Will joined us for our conversation with the Johns, and now we're in the driver's seat, explaining Gen X lingo to him. I think we did an okay job. If you're enjoying the Andy Beshear podcast, remember, you can download us on all major platforms or subscribe to our YouTube channel at Andy Beshear Podcast. Your downloads and your subscriptions are what keep us going and keeps this conversation going. So make sure you're a part of it, and let's do this together.